This week, Congress divided over Iran war powers as the Trump administration paused military operations while threatening escalation. The Fifth Circuit advanced a detention policy toward Supreme Court review. Trade tensions mounted, with 50% tariffs on Canadian goods and levies on 60 nations. The president prepares to meet with Israeli leadership amid rising regional tensions. The House has voted to limit the Trump administration's authority to wage war in Iran, approving a war powers resolution that would force military operations to end within 60 days unless Congress authorizes continued action. The measure passed Thursday with a 214-208 vote, including support from 4 Republicans. However, the Senate rejected the same resolution Friday in a 47-49 vote, leaving the administration free to continue operations without a congressionally mandated timeline. The clash reflects disagreement over presidential war powers. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the 1973 War Powers Resolution is unconstitutional. The escalating conflict has killed 18 American service members and disrupted global oil supplies, driving gas prices above $4 per gallon nationwide. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld a mandatory detention policy for people who entered the country illegally, blocking earlier rulings that had ordered some detainees released on bond. The stay, issued July 21st, covers Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. Assistant Attorney General Brett Shumate said the ruling makes clear that illegal immigrants do not have a constitutional right to remain free during removal proceedings. Critics disputed that characterization. The policy, established through a July 2025 memo, requires detention without bond for anyone who crossed the border illegally, regardless of how long they've been in the country or whether they filed for asylum. The ruling sets up a potential Supreme Court showdown, as federal appeals courts across the country have issued conflicting decisions on the policy's constitutionality. The Fifth Circuit will hear further arguments on September 24th. President Trump has ordered a pause in military operations against Iran to allow diplomatic negotiations to proceed. Trump told Axios on Monday that he directed the military to cease fire on Iranian targets near the southern coast and Strait of Hormuz on Friday, following a meeting with top military and national security advisors. However, Trump warned he would resume very strong military action if talks collapse. Negotiations are being conducted primarily between Iran and Oman, with involvement from Qatar, Pakistan, Egypt, and senior Trump advisors. The talks focus on reopening the Strait of Hormuz and relaunching nuclear deal negotiations. Negotiators are exploring a framework where Iran, Oman, and other regional states would collect service fees for maritime security and passage. Trump described the diplomatic window as narrow, stating either it goes fast or not at all. He is scheduled to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday. President Trump will meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House on Tuesday. Netanyahu travels to Washington on Monday, combining the visit with attendance at a funeral service for Senator Lindsey Graham. The meeting was arranged after Netanyahu requested an appointment last week. According to the White House, discussions focused on a potential Oval Office meeting, with Trump confirming he would meet the Israeli leader during the visit. Netanyahu had postponed an earlier trip after Graham's funeral was delayed. The meeting comes as the administration weighs military options against Iran. Trump has indicated he is considering expanding operations targeting Iranian assets, a decision that would reshape regional dynamics. No formal agenda has been disclosed, though discussions on military coordination and Iran's strategy are expected to dominate the talks. The Trump administration has announced a 50% tariff on certain Canadian goods, effective next month. The duties apply to products including hockey sticks, wine, and cement, affecting roughly $20 billion in annual trade. The administration invoked Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930, a provision never before used, citing what it says is Canadian discrimination against U.S. exports. Officials pointed to Canadian auto policies favoring domestic production and dairy rules giving European cheese preferential treatment over American imports. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called the tariffs a direct violation of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, and pledged to intensify negotiations. The tariffs exempt potash, critical minerals, and most energy products. The move marks an escalation in trade tensions and could raise consumer prices on imported goods. President Trump has imposed new tariffs on goods from 60 countries, citing forced labor practices. The duties, ranging from 10 to 12.5%, took effect Friday at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time, just hours after the announcement on July 23rd. The White House framed the action as protecting American workers and consumers from goods produced under exploitative labor conditions. The tariffs draw on existing U.S. law, including the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act framework. However, applying that standard to 60 countries through tariffs marks a significant escalation compared with prior enforcement actions that typically targeted specific goods or companies. Affected trading partners may challenge the move at the World Trade Organization, while domestic importers and retailers are assessing exposure and watching for any exemption processes. The United States and Saudi Arabia have formalized a landmark nuclear cooperation agreement. The U.S. Energy Department announced Wednesday that the two nations signed a 102-3 agreement, the formal term for peaceful nuclear cooperation accords. U.S. Secretary of Energy Chris Wright and Saudi Minister of Energy Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman signed the documents with President Trump's approval. Under the accord, American firms will construct nuclear facilities in Saudi Arabia, including a feasibility study to assess uranium enrichment capability. The agreement diverges from traditional U.S. frameworks by not imposing the most stringent inspection regime and permitting uranium enrichment and reprocessing of spent nuclear fuel. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated the U.S. would not reach agreements that risk proliferation. Congressional approval is required before the agreement becomes final. Arizona's primary elections Tuesday shaped high-stakes November matchups in a state viewed as decisive for the 2026 midterms. U.S. Rep. Andy Biggs, a Trump-endorsed candidate who refused to certify the 2020 presidential election results, won the Republican nomination for governor. He will face incumbent Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs. In Arizona's 1st Congressional District, Trump-endorsed former NFL kicker Jay Feely won the Republican primary. He'll advance to face Democrat Ruben Gallego, a U.S. representative. In the 6th District, Republican Rep. Juan Ciscomani ran unopposed and will face military veteran Joanna Mendoza. National analysts view Arizona's 1st and 6th districts among the country's most competitive congressional races. President Donald Trump is pressuring Senate Republican leadership to cancel the chamber's scheduled August recess and remain in session until passage of the Save America Act, which would impose citizenship verification and photo ID requirements for voter registration. Trump directed Senate Majority Leader John Thune on Monday to advance the bill without delay and urged elimination of the legislative filibuster to clear its path. Thune countered that insufficient Senate support exists to remove the filibuster or pass the measure in its current form. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer stated the SAVE Act is dead on arrival. Several Republican senators, including Mike Lee of Utah and Rick Scott of Florida, backed Trump's push to keep the chamber in session. The Senate is scheduled to depart for a 5-week August break on August 6th. President Trump visited a General Motors plant in Michigan to defend his tariff strategy, framing it as an incentive for automakers to produce vehicles domestically. The visit came as the first commercial truck crossed the newly opened Gordie Howe International Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario, amid escalating trade tensions with Canada. The White House cited General Motors' $6 billion commitment to U.S. manufacturing as evidence the tariff approach is working. However, Michigan's job growth remains sluggish. The state added only 500 jobs over 12 months, far behind Texas's 177,900. Canada has responded to U.S. tariffs with its own 25% duties on vehicles and parts. An additional 50% tariff increase on Canadian goods is planned for August. A shooting at Seattle's Bite of Seattle Food Festival has left 3 people dead and 4 others injured. Gunfire erupted Sunday evening at Seattle Center around 6 p.m., with with witnesses reporting two individuals shooting at each other while bystanders were caught in the crossfire. The victims killed include a 19-year-old man, a 44-year-old man, and a 56-year-old woman. 4 others were wounded, including a young child, and were transported to hospitals in stable condition. Police recovered 2 firearms at the scene and took 1 suspect into custody, while a second suspect remained at large. Seattle Police Acting Chief Tyrone Davis said officers arrived within seconds and provided emergency aid. Mayor Katie Wilson condemned the attack as an act of horrific violence. Authorities noted the absence of surveillance cameras in the immediate area and are seeking public video and information. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is preparing to reopen Rivers Correctional Institution in North Carolina as a 1,400-bed immigrant detention facility under contract with GEO Group, a private prison operator. The facility had sat empty for 5 years. GEO Group, which previously operated Rivers from 2001 to 2021, posted a job listing this month signaling imminent staffing preparations. Governor Josh Stein condemned the reopening, stating that ICE has a proven track record of arresting, detaining, and abusing American citizens. During its previous operation, Rivers faced repeated complaints, including allegations of understaffing, inadequate medical care, and discrimination. A 2007 class action lawsuit alleged a pattern of denial of medical treatment at the facility. That's the week from the American Star News. For complete coverage of every story in this briefing, visit theamericanstarnews.com and subscribe so you never miss the weekly review.